So in 2022, I read about 50 books, which is a number. Of these books, I rated most of them about 3 stars. There's nothing that I super duper loved, and there's nothing that I super duper hated, which I guess is good. Everything was just so average. The lowest rating that I gave any book this year was 2 stars, which I gave to a couple of books. Those books are what I will be talking about today, because I have nothing better to do, and I love to complain. So consider this as my worst books of 2022 list, except instead of being the worst books, they're the most below average, kind of disappointing books. To start, I read Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. This is a World War II historical fiction book. It centers around 3 different girls. One of them, named Kazia, is a Polish teenager who gets sent off to a concentration camp. There is a Nazi doctor named Herta who works at that concentration camp. And then there's like a middle-aged socialite turned volunteer woman named Caroline. It's important to note that Caroline and Herta are like based on like real people. I'm not sure about Kazia, but Caroline and Herta are definitely real. So generally, I enjoyed the experience of reading this. I think World War II is a just a setting that's so rife with interesting stories to tell, and I feel like that's what really kept this book afloat. I think aside from that, the characters couldn't really stand too well on their own, and I thought the writing was kind of juvenile. But, you know, who am I to say? On top of that, I bet you could guess, but Herta and Kazia's stories are very intertwined, being that they both live in the same concentration camp, Kazia as the prisoner and Herta as, like, the prisonee. I don't know. She's, you know, the fucking doctor who's doing all these, like, nasty experiments on them. And then, while, like, you know, they're fucking suffering at this concentration camp, Caroline is, like, I don't know, just fucking around in, like, America. I think you could take her out of this book and very little of importance would change. Just, like, her whole story is so crazy to me, especially when, like, you're reading one chapter and it's, like, Kazia fucking, like, starving in a concentration camp, and then the next page is, like, Caroline walking around in a gala being like, where's my boyfriend? I don't know! It's just kind of crazy, and I think she should have been removed. I think she doesn't add anything to the book, and I think, honestly, she kind of, like, detracts from the overall experience. On top of that, I think something that Martha Hall Kelly was really trying to do that I think she did not succeed in was I think she tried to make Herta, the Nazi doctor, a little bit sympathetic. And don't get me wrong, I really appreciate when authors make evil people nuanced or like a little bit sympathetic, where you can almost be like, oh my god, this person is like human, and yet they're still doing these bad things. I think when it's done right, it almost makes you think this person is like worse, because you're like, this person could be good and like they're not, they're like a shit person. But I just think it was so poorly done in this novel, because it was so obvious to me that the author was trying to make you sympathize with her, because she's like depressed and like she suffers like a little bit of abuse, not a little bit, like a fair amount of abuse from her higher-ups, but at the same time she's doing like these disgusting experiments on the people of the concentration camp, you know, like she's shoving glass in their legs and like giving them rabies and whatever. Like she's really fucking them up. Bad people can be sympathetic too, but it's like, it just didn't work in this book. It didn't work. It felt really off. Maybe I'm insane, but I don't know, not to bring up Kurt Vonnegut or anything, but I feel like in Mother Night, the main character of that book is like a Nazi propagandist who's like secretly working for the American government, but he's still doing all these bad things for like the Nazis by like spreading their propaganda or whatever. And like he's wanted for like horrible war crimes and whatever. And he's like not a bad person, but he has done horrible things. I don't even think that book was great. But I think it had a lot of interesting ideas, and I think it was told in an interesting way. And I feel like that was like a better example of something like that, where the bad guy is like nuanced. Anyway, I just didn't love it. I think there were good bits, and I think there were really bad bits. I didn't love Kazia either, which is crazy. Like, how do you make, like, a character who is, like, literally in a concentration camp unsympathetic? Why is the character who is in the concentration camp unsympathetic, but then you make, like, the fucking Nazi doctor sympathetic? I don't understand. Anyway. Also, can we talk about, really briefly, the cover? Like, why are the 3 girls here? Like, who are the 3 girls? Is one of them supposed to be Herta? Because Herta's fucking evil. Like, they're not friends. It makes you think that she's like the Nazi doctor's gonna like switch sides, but she doesn't. She's just fucking evil the whole time. But she's also depressed, so you have to feel bad for her. Anyway, switching gears, I also read A Duel with the Vampire Lord by Elise Kova. And I also did not love this one. I also gave this one 2 stars, obviously. you know, it's a forbidden romance about this girl who's living in a village where they have to like kill all the vampires like every 1,000 years or something, and then she like falls in love with the vampire lord. This book wasn't like totally terrible, and I don't hate it in the same way that I hate Lilac Girls, but it just disappointed me. It made me disappointed. I wanted vampires that were like, this is the skin of a killer, Bella. I wanted them to all be wearing like sexy crushed velvet overcoats and like Victorian clothing, and they had like parasols in the day, and they're all fucking pale and like weird. And they're not that. They're just kind of like normal people, which kind of sucked for me. Like I just wanted like blood-sucking sexy vampires, and I didn't really get that. I thought the chemistry and the romance wasn't great either. I didn't really like any of it, but like I didn't hate any of it either. So something that I did appreciate was the female lead, Florian. She's a forge maiden, which means she's basically like a blacksmith, you know, always hammering away at the forge and whatever. And because it's told from her perspective, she keeps making references, like metaphors. Like, this is just like when I like hammer down metal and it changes because it gets hot or whatever. Like, I don't know. I thought there were some really well done like forge references in there, but I feel like that was also overused. Like, just they were constantly talking about like the heat of the forge and we're gonna hammer it and whatever. I don't know, I just didn't love it. It just wasn't for me. I just wanted sexy vampires that sucked blood. They don't even have to suck blood, I don't think. They just use it for like magic purposes. Like, what the fuck, bro? What the fuck? What's even the point? Also, Florian looks like Kris Jenner, which kind of freaks me out. I think if I didn't have the expectations that I had going into it, I probably would have enjoyed it more. But I don't think it would ever be more than 3 stars. Kind of a mid book, because it was a mid-year of reading. Those are just 2 of the books that I rated 2 stars. There were technically 4. The other 2 were Constance by Matthew Simmons. And I don't remember that book because it was the first book I read in 2022. So the other book was The Haunting of Hill House, which I also don't remember anything about, and I just thought was so mid. I just thought it was so mid that I couldn't even give it 3 stars. It wasn't scary enough for me. I wanted it to be scary. I read it on Halloween. It should have been scary. It should have been ooky spooky, but it wasn't. I'm not a big fan of psychological horror. Like, it's just not scary to me. It's not scary to me anymore. I don't know why. If there was somebody like living in the walls of that house, then I'd be scared. Somebody should rewrite The Haunting of Hill House and just make it somebody like living in the walls. That's frightening. That's scary.